I chose to study the relationship between the percentage of gross domestic product, or GDP, produced by the agriculture sector, and mean years in school completed by men aging from 55 to 64. For your knowledge going forward, gross domestic product is the total value of final goods produced and services provided in a country during 1 year. Now, as you can see from the Gapminder graph, there is a negative association between the two variables, and I will be arguing that as a country's mean years in school completed by men aging from 55 to 64 increases, the country's percentage of GDP produced by the agriculture sector will decrease. It is important to study this relationship since as of 2016, according to the World Bank, agriculture accounted for about 4% of global GDP, as you can see from this graph. I chose variables based on education and GDP production because it can be seen throughout history that levels of education are closely correlated with the means of production such as agriculture, industry, or service sectors. Economists agree that the higher levels of education correlate with higher percentages of industry and service sectors, while lower education levels correlate with higher percentages of the agriculture sector. For the education variable, I chose mean years of school completed, which includes primary, secondary, and tertiary education, because it most adequately represents the level of education for the preferred sex, male, and age bracket 55 to 64. This age bracket was chosen due to the fact that the average age of a farm worker in the United States, according to the U.S. Labor Department, is 58 years old, and worldwide averages have been increasing steadily over the past decade. I chose to focus on men because the majority of farm workers are male, with only, as of 2018, according to the World Bank, about 28% of farm workers being female. For the GDP production variable, I chose to focus on the percentage of GDP produced by the agriculture sector, which consists of forestry, hunting, fishing, cultivation of crops, and livestock production, because agriculture-based jobs require less education, thus supporting my hypothesis stated previously. Gapminder also allows for the plotting of each of the two variables separately over time to show the change of education completion and agricultural production since 1970 and 1960 respectively. As you can see, this line graph shows the positive relationship between mean years in school for men aging from 55 to 64 and time. Since 1970, the United States mean years in school has increased by 5.06 years, Russia's has increased by 6.54 years, South Africa has increased by 3.73 years, and China's has increased by 4.95 years, all at relatively steady rates. These 4 countries were chosen to represent this relationship because they are all high producers of agriculture or agricultural exports for their respective world regions. Next, I used Gapminder to plot the relationship between the percentage of GDP produced by agriculture and time since 1960, and as you can see from the graph, there is a negative relationship between the two variables. Since 1960, the United States percentage of GDP produced by the agriculture sector has decreased by 0.26%, Russia's has decreased by 11.59%, South Africa has decreased by 8.41%, and China decreased by 15.28%, all by varying rates. Lastly, to support my hypothesis on the negative relationship between education levels and GDP production by sectors, I used Gapminder to plot the relationship between literacy rates and the percentage of GDP produced by the agriculture sector, because mean years in school are closely related to the literacy rates. As you can see from the graph, there is also a negative relationship between these two variables. In conclusion, There is a clear negative association between agricultural percentage of GDP production and the mean years of school completed by men aging from 55 to 64.